In this section, I would like to illustrate the Etd landscape from my perspective. This illustration is simply to contextualize how everything comes together to serve the aims and objectives of the NQF. Please bear in mind that we are not trying to illustrate a hierarchy of who reports to whom, but rather to identify relevant relationships and to form a basic understanding. I've separated the illustration into three sections, namely the overarching accountability at a national or governmental level, relevant key legislation, and the institutional bodies and frameworks that have arisen from such legislation. Be mindful that you are not expected to become an expert on all aspects of the Etd landscape. However, I do encourage you to explore these further as you continue your journey as an Etd practitioner. Let's begin. The Department of Higher Education and Training is responsible to build the necessary capacity for effective monitoring, evaluation, and support to the entire skills development system and its institutions. For those who have had a chance to explore the DHET website, you might have noticed another acronym, PSET, Post-School Education and Training. This refers to education and training opportunities for people who have left school or for those adults who may never have been to school but require education opportunities. This is generally the realm within which we operate as occupationally directed Etd practitioners. Some sectors use the term Yale, Youth and Adult Learning and Education, and others may refer to adult and community education. I also want to make a quick reference to the National Skills Authority, or NSA, which is a statutory body established in terms of the Skills Development Act. Among other, their role is to or includes advising the Minister on national skills development policies, strategies, and plans. They undertake regular reviews on the effectiveness of the governance structures and the performance of the system at large. I would say their role is to monitor and advise on efficiency of Etd systems in South Africa. In terms of the national skills development imperatives, over the years we have had a number of national skills development strategies and a more recent national skills development plan promulgated by the Minister of Higher Education and Training after consultation with an NSA. These imperatives aim to improve skills development in terms of Section 9 of the Skills Development Act. The National Skills Development Plan has been crafted with the context of the broader National Development Plan for the nation and the White Paper on Post-School Education and Training. These are good reads for those who wish to explore the national ideas and imperatives further for your own interest. The National Qualifications Framework Act, which is Act number 67 of 2008 and its subsequent amendments, provides for the National Qualifications Framework, the responsibilities of the Minister of Higher Education and Training, also provides for SAQA and the Quality Councils and so forth. It also serves to repeal the SAQA Act number 58 of 1999, as the NQF Act actually replaces the SAQA Act. So let's take a look at the NQF. The NQF itself is a comprehensive system approved by the Minister for the classification, registration, and publication of quality assured national qualifications. We'll take a closer look at the structure of the NQF a little later on. It is basically a single integrated system comprising of three qualification sub-frameworks, namely general and further education and training, higher education, and trades and occupations. And the objectives of the NQF are designed to contribute to the full personal development of each learner and the social and economic development of the nation at large. SAQA is a stakeholder body that registers qualifications and standards on the National Qualifications Framework and ensures that the education and training that is delivered enables learners to reach these qualifications and standards. Initially, SAQA was established in terms of the SAQA Act, which continues with the replacement of the SAQA Act by the NQF Act. SAQA oversees the further development and implementation of the NQF, the achievement of the objectives of the NQF, and the coordination of the three sub-frameworks. All right, and then in doing so, we have 3 quality councils, and these 3 quality councils are tasked with developing and managing each of the sub-frameworks. One of them being Umaluzi for the General and Further Education Training sub-framework, the Council on Higher Education for the Higher Education Qualifications sub-framework, and the QCTO, or Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, for the Occupational Qualifications sub-framework. I'll also talk a little bit more about this at a later stage. Of special interest in occupationally directed ETD is the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations because they are mandated to oversee the design, implementation, assessment and certification of occupational qualifications, including trades, on the Occupational Qualifications sub-framework. It is interesting to note that when designing new occupational qualifications registered on the NQF, the QCTO makes use of the Organizing Framework for Occupations, which is basically a standardized list of occupations. We currently have OFO 2019. There were previous versions in place, but this framework will continue to change as occupations change. For example, we may see a significant change to the OFO with the implications of the 4th Industrial Revolution and the future world of work. The SETAs, or Sector Education Training Authorities, actually require an STF to report on skills development using these OFO codes, and Employment Equity and BBBE reporting also aligns to the use of OFO codes. So ultimately, this allows the Department of Higher Education to gather structured data around the progress of skills development in relation to occupations in South Africa. We've mentioned SETA, so let's just talk about the Skills Development Act. The Skills Development Act promotes education and training in the workplace. It governs the National Skills Authority, the National Skills Fund, the skills development levies, as well as sector education training authorities and their responsibilities. The Skills Development Levies Act imposes levies for skills development and explains how that is distributed or used. The SETA, in terms of the SETAs, there are currently 21 sector education training authorities established in terms of the Skills Development Act, and they represent the various industrial sectors in South Africa, such as wholesale and retail, food and bev, manufacturing, services SETA, which covers contact centers and many other service-related organizations, mining and mineral sector, and the construction sector, etc. They are mandated to develop and implement sector skills plans, which involves quite a bit of research and information gathering to promote learning, including workplace learning in their sectors or in their industry. The QCTO has also delegated quality assurance powers to the SETAs, and SETAs play an important role in gathering information on labor market skills needs and training provision, which is essential in planning to meet the country's skills needs. The ETQA is a body accredited in terms of the Skills Development Act, responsible for monitoring and auditing achievements in terms of national standards and qualifications, and to which specific functions relating to the monitoring and auditing of national standards and qualifications have been assigned. We will further discuss the role of the ETQA when we get to the assessment and moderation processes at a later stage, so that you can understand how they fit in. It is important to note that SETA-related activities are supported by tight service level agreements entered into with the DHET with agreed performance indicators and targets set. So the SETAs are held accountable. And it's important to be aware also of related legislation such as Employment Equity Act, which aims to achieve equity in the workplace, and the BBBE codes, Act and codes aimed at empowering previously disadvantaged groups and strengthening the economy in the spirit of reparation and transformation. There are skills development reporting requirements for both as well. We also need to be aware of the national targets to develop designated groups such as 85% Black South Africans. The Employment Equity Act defines Black as African, Colored, and Indian. 54% women and 4% people with disabilities. We can now understand why information related to race, gender, and disability status is required in our skills development reporting. Wow, so much for keeping this illustration simple, hey? I just want to take a moment to emphasize the role of the CETA and, of course, the ETQA. 1% of the organization's leviable payroll is paid towards the skills development levy. 20% of this amount is distributed for national skills funding, and 80% of this amount is distributed to the CETA. The CETA then allocates a portion towards administration, research for sector skills planning, and the QCTO. Organizations may also claim back a portion in respect of mandatory and discretionary grants, but to claim back, the SDF will be completing a workplace skills plan, an ATR, which is also known as an Annexure 2 of the Skills Development Act. And the skills development facilitator develops this workplace skills plan in the interest of the organization and the workforce. They report these plans to the CETA, which helps the CETA to understand and support the needs of the sector. The annual training report is a confirmation of all education, training, and development that has taken place in the previous financial year, which is compared to the workplace skills plan of the previous year. And the aim is for the organization to have at least completed 80% of planned versus actual training over that year, and SDFs will be asked to account for any variances in their reporting. The ETQA oversees quality assurance functions that are delegated by the QCTO, and one of these functions include the registration of constituent assessors and moderators who are ideally subject matter experts and practitioners within the relevant sector. So that's also quite important for those of you who are wishing to complete the assessor program and moderator programs in future and wish to be able to assess and moderate for training providers within the relevant sector. In a nutshell, all these elements aim to come together to contribute to quality education, training, and development for the sake of our learners and the social and economic growth of our nation at large. I want you to take some time to consider the following questions. How do you think you might fit into the Etd landscape in your role? And what influence do you think you could have? I've listed the questions that you may consider, and at this stage you may also have some questions, so feel free to jot these questions down. We will revisit the Etd landscape in a forum or a live webinar at a later stage.